Hey, this is Pablo with Meditation Amsterdam, and today I want to talk about anxiety. I've been getting some requests from people that I'm working with about ways to regulate your anxiety better, and I thought it would be handy to make one video that is not so much about techniques, but a kind of framing of anxiety as a state of mind that can help you to better inform the techniques that you may be using to deal with it, and make them far more effective, or give them a much better chance of being effective. So as usual, I thought I'd do a little diagram about this stuff, and in order to illustrate this, I thought I would use the analogy of the whirlpool. So I'm going to draw myself a little whirlpool here. And I suppose a whirlpool looks kind of like this. And when you are facing a situation of anxiety, you as an individual are somewhere here, let's say, and this is a sad smiley, and it's being dragged, and it feels this anxiety that is kind of, it's pulling at you in the direction of the whirlpool, trying to kind of suck you in. And so there's a force or an emotion that is going in a certain direction. And because the sensations in the body and the overthinking typically kick off when that starts to happen, we have a tendency of trying to go away from the discomfort. So this arrow here would be us trying to not feel anxious, and you see that it's going in the opposite direction of the emotion there. So you have these emotions pulling you into a whirlpool of anxiety or whatever it may be, and you are trying to step out of it. Now, this trying to step out of it is let's say that it comes with degrees of subtlety and effectiveness. In the beginning, you may be simply repressing your anxious feelings, so you don't even recognize them. You're just it's being unconsciously just stored away in the body. So it's big question mark. You don't even know it's happening. You may move from there to more suppression, and the difference between the two being that suppression is conscious. So you consciously know that some bad feeling is about to come, and you push it back down. Suppression. So repression is you're totally blind. Suppression is the area where bad habits and things of that kind live, because you are actively escaping something that you're going to have to deal with at some point. Now, it could be that you express it, right? So maybe you go into expression of some of these uncomfortable feelings and the rest of it. So you act them out, but that acting out doesn't mean that you're going with the emotion. It still means that you are trying, by acting them out, you're trying to make them go away. So all of these are trying to make the feeling go away, whether consciously or unconsciously. But of course, you start to do a little bit of reading, and you've been listening to, I don't know, people's podcasts or some pop psychology stuff, and then you start to try techniques, right? Techniques. And this is the one that I want to focus on, because anyone listening to this channel or anything about anxiety is typically looking for solutions, and those solutions come in the form of techniques. They've gotten more effective over time. So it used to be just psychology, trying to essentially talk your way out of feeling anxious by finding silver linings in whatever's happening to you, telling yourself a more positive story, the sunny side of the street approach, or glass half full type of psychology. Then we started with, tapping and, EMDR, I think it's called, or EMD, whatever. Then we go into breath work or visualization, more embodiment, you name it, right? So techniques have a very broad type of spectrum. Now, the problem with techniques, and this is the main takeaway from this video, is that implicit in the technique, there is a desire to go away from the emotions still, right? So there is this rejection of the emotion as it is, and a desire to pull away from it. So when you're applying the technique, somewhere in the back of your head, you want things to be different than they are. You want the anxiety to not be there. Now, what does that create? Well, you have an emotion that is going in one direction, which is in this case the anxiety, but it could be also sadness or whatever, right? Anger, you name it, right? And then you have a rejection of that emotion and a trying to pull away from it in another direction. And as we said, this could take different levels. Some of them are unconscious, some of them are a little bit more conscious, some of them are a little bit better informed, as in proper techniques to dampen or reduce the sting of the emotion, and maybe to make the whirlpool less powerful. But here's the clincher, or here's the the irony, Anxiety is made of resistance to what is. So the tension between these arrows pulling in different directions, which I'm going to illustrate here in red, is going to feed the anxiety, because anxiety is the tug between these two things. The rejection to what is what feeds the anxiety. And if what is an anxious feeling and you reject it, you're adding more wood to the fire. And so you have a technique of breath work in which which you may be doing perfectly. Physically, you are doing it correctly. Your posture is good. Your mind is steady. But there is somewhere in the back of your mind a desire to get rid of the anxiety that is already there. And that creates the tension in both directions, which will keep feeding the anxiety, because anxiety is made of tension and rejection. It is a no to the now. It is a no to what is, a kind of this should not be happening type of mindset. So I wanted to illustrate this because very often what I get asked and what you see in videos is people telling you, you should be breathing this way, or tapping your forehead, or pressing this part of your hand, or whatever. I've tried all these things to greater or lesser success, but the one thing that works for me and that works for everybody is to, you don't have to drop the technique necessarily, but you have to come at the technique already with a kind of willingness to go in the direction of the anxiety. So you go into the direction of the whirlpool. I've never been in a whirlpool. Although swimming back home in Guatemala, I would swim in the ocean and stuff, and we always knew that the ocean was a system, and there were parts of the ocean that would pull you in by half a mile, and that the way to get out was not to try to linearly fight your way out, but to fight to swim your way to the to sideways. And because it is a system, there'll be areas on the sides that would push you right out. So the message is to go with the grain of the emotion, and to almost allow the whirlpool to suck you in. And this is the place that you're avoiding, right? This big question mark, this or scary place where all kinds of big bad feelings are sitting. So you're trying to avoid this, and in trying to avoid this, you create this pull in the opposite direction, but the whirlpool doesn't go away, and that creates anxiety. So whether it's anxiety, anger, or whatever, the message is not to suppress, repress, or express the emotion, but rather to feel it. Just to allow yourself to feel it fully and let it play itself out. So you go with the grain of it, and And what happens when you come to this space is the emotion just kind of vanishes, the whirlpool disappears, and then you are able to come here to this smiley area here that you wanted to go in the first place. But you're able to do it because you allow the emotion to play itself out, which is what it needs to do. So there's energy in the system that needs to be, that needs to move. And the way you allow it to move is to feel the emotion, and you feel it fully. It's a bit of a strange thing, isn't it? You know, and there's a bit of disappointment sometimes in hearing that the way to get rid of your bad emotions is to actually have them. To actually have them. Right? So we think that we're having bad emotions, but what we're having is a little bit of bad emotion with a ton of rejection and tension against the bad emotion, which just keeps feeding the whole cycle. So the way to stop feeding the cycle is to come to this, you know, we're back to this big theme of acceptance that I've been talking about in the past few videos. And so when you accept and surrender, so that would be another one, surrender. You allow the emotion to be felt. It plays itself out. The whole thing is gone. Now, I've been sharing some frames of mind to come to that acceptance of anxiety or bad emotions that you can use as a kind of holding the space for the emotion to be there and for you to feel okay with it. Like I said, you can still use anxiety techniques such as breath work or anything that you think is effective for you, but the frame of mind, an acceptance frame of mind or a surrendered frame of mind, is crucial, because if you hold even a tiny bit of resistance against the anxiety, it just feeds from it. So you need to drop all resistance completely. Now, what are ways to drop resistance completely? I have found for myself and also the people I work with that there are certain stories or certain analogies or metaphors that you can use to place yourself in a welcoming, loving, and correct frame of mind towards the anxiety, so that you can drop your resistance, so that you recognize that you can take a different attitude towards it. Now, we have to be very, very careful here. When we adopt these frames of mind, I'm not suggesting you tell yourself a story. Okay? So stories, psychologizing, explaining, thinking, it's just not the way we want to go, because most of the work we need to do is of feeling and body awareness and accepting in the body. We don't want to accept in the head. Emotions, feelings, things of that kind are not amenable to English. They're not amenable to logic. You can't talk your way in or out of it. It's language thinking is a very poor tool for this. So I'm not suggesting that you make up stories. What I'm suggesting is that you acquire a certain frame or a certain mindset that surrounds and that creates an accepting environment for yourself and for the emotion. What are examples of things that I use for myself and that I suggest to people when trying to acquire a more correct frame of mind to accept anxiety? One of them which I use is the puppy analogy. Puppy. What is the puppy analogy? I don't know if you watch these dodo videos or all these videos where little puppies are rescued from the gutter and cared for, and then you see them all happy afterwards. If you feel discomfort in the body through anxious feelings, one frame that you could take is to say, as opposed to rejecting it and wanting it to go away and just going like, this is so nasty, why does it keep happening? You think of it as a puppy in the gutter. So there's a puppy in the gutter inside your chest, which is coming to you for help. Now, I don't know about you, but I think you would need to be a bit of a sociopath to kick a puppy away or just push it away and go like, not now. You know, it's like I have better things to do. What you would typically do when you see a helpless creature is your protective instinct would come out, and you want to see justice in this world. You don't want to live in a world where helpless little creatures are, you know, kicked to the gutter and left there to deal with it. So if you see your anxiety as a puppy that has been, you know, totally neglected and maybe abandoned for a long time actually, which is kind of what it is, then you feel this protective instinct and you create a space. You become this welcoming space in which that feeling is supported and accepted, welcomed, and it's going to be sort of taken care of, right? You can even use your hands and sort of, you know, let it know that it's okay. So the puppy frame is one. I have another one which is the old guard dog, and the old dog is an analogy in which you can imagine that this being your alert system. You know, anxiety is like this alert system of fight or flight, right? Survival. And that alert system has kept you and every single ancestor all the way back to, you know, when we were all lizards, alive. Right? It's the one thing that lets you know something's not okay. So it's a very valuable part of you. And you can think of it like this really old, really faithful, dedicated dog that has been sort of guarding the dog and guarding the door and sort of, you know, growling at everything that even resembles a threat. But it's getting really old, really tired, and it's time for it to retire, right? So what would you do with an old faithful dog that has served you all its life? Again, you wouldn't reject it. You wouldn't go like, I'm not going to feed you. You look like crap and you're growly. You know, you're going to, again, the protective instinct, the grateful instinct of saying, you know, you're a valuable part of me. You've done your work. You've done it as well as you could. It's time for you to now retire. And I'm going to be the one looking after you now, right? So you've looked after me. Now it's my turn to look after you. And you entirely flip the narrative. Because see, there's an implicit narrative in the back of your head saying like, you know, this feeling sucks and this whole thing sucks. I want it to go away. But by acquiring frames of this kind, you come to better understand and better accept these things, which are already there, which are part of you, in a way that creates a frame in which the emotion can essentially just play itself out. And 5 minutes later, you'll just go about your business. There's a final one, which is the Ancestor story. Ancestor. And that is one in which every bit of trauma or lack of self-acceptance that you have has been passed on to you. These are stories upon stories upon stories that, you know, your parents told you, that their parents told them, and every generation, unless somebody along that chain did the work on themselves to resolve trauma, you are the inheritor of every line of trauma and every reaction to it that has ever played itself out in the past. It's all in you, right? So say that, you know, your dad was a very lazy type of person, and the reason he was lazy is because his, you know, and so you you have a certain fear to laziness because you saw what it did to your dad. And so that's one degree of trauma in one generation. But he turned out to be lazy because his dad used to like beat the crap out of him or just neglect him because he was kind of a drunk type of dude. That was your grandparent. So there's another degree of trauma. And that guy was a drunkard because he never met his parents because, you know, they couldn't take care of him as a kid and just, you know, left him in the gutter or whatever. So every single generation that you look back is the reaction to some kind of trauma of the previous one, and now it's all in you, right? So whenever this comes to visit, it is almost like every single ancestor is coming saying, you know, here's all my muck, could you please resolve it for me? And so you have this, if you have this understanding, you see that you can resolve and undo an entire stream of trauma coming all the way back from the distant past. It's all here, and you can either run away from it and be yet another link in the chain that passes it on, or you can be that place in which that trauma is safe to be resolved, and by resolving it in you, so they say, you also resolve it retrospectively for everybody else, because time doesn't really exist apart from the mind, and therefore that resolution is a real awakening of consciousness. So seeing yourself as that person in whom the ancestral trauma is being resolved, because you have the information now, you have the courage, and you're doing the work, is a great frame to welcome that trauma and say, oh, this is, grandma so-and-so, with her fear of whatever, which is now stored in me. And, it's coming to me for resolution, and I'm going to take that resolution step as opposed to running away from it. So these are examples. They are by no means to be taken literally. I think that we should all find the frame of mind that help us welcome anxiety or bad emotions. And so the gist of this video is essentially, there are frames that you can acquire to lower your resistance and become fully accepting towards the emotions as they're coming up. And it is also to say that regardless of the technique that you're using, the frame under which you are using that technique has to be one of full acceptance, that even if there is one tiny bit of rejection against what already is, whether that is anxiety or whatever, is going to keep feeding it, is going to make any technique ineffective, because anxiety is made of resistance. So your first task is to come to full terms with the fact that it's happening, find a nice frame that keeps that acceptance bubble in place while the feelings are playing themselves out, and to just go with the grain of the emotion as opposed to trying to go against it, which creates even more tension within yourself. So I hope that helps, and I'll see you in more videos soon. Cheers.